everybody, this is JDGaming back today with a constructed advanced format proper version of the Zombie Horde deck that we took a look at last week. So basically zombies have always been a fun thing in my dueling history just because one of my friends was always playing a budget Zombie World deck back when that structure deck with Red-Eye Zombie Dragon came out, and pretty much all through high school when I was playing Psychics I had to deal with having zombie monsters that I couldn't trade with Psychic Jumper, and basically it was a crazy situation, but it was a lot of fun. And looking back now that he doesn't play the game anymore, I thought this was a fun way to kind of think back to those times, and honestly the deck is a lot of fun to do. So if you want to check out that video, I'll link it up at the top here. A lot of those basic concepts do still carry over, but after playing around with the theme and trying some of my own stuff, I did find a few fun tricks, and so we'll go through in this video and discuss those. It's going to be a let's build as always for my main deck profiles, so I'll go through and explain my reasonings for choices, how you play this stuff, just things I'm keeping in mind. If you just want to see the alphabetical list that you typically see, check out the table of contents in the description box down below. I always include that so you can go ahead and see the list or any other section of the video, and then if you have any questions remaining afterwards, feel free to share those down below. So without further ado, let's build Zombie Horde. As always, the first step in building or playing any deck is to establish the theme and to have an idea of what makes the core so you know what goal your deck is aiming for. And here we're taking a look at the classic field spell Zombie World. I like playing just 2 copies of this because it's an interesting card but not the best on its own. So all monsters on the field and in both graveyards become zombie monsters, which is cool for blanket wiping out any type advantages or necessities for, let's say, something like 𝗍𝗍, who requires different types and attributes. Neither player can tribute summon monsters except zombies as well, so in situations where your opponent may want to bring out a teched-in tribute monster, or if you're playing against a deck that requires non-zombie monsters to be tribute summoned, this thing locks them out as a kind of a bonus as well. But the big thing that separates this card from modern field spells is that it doesn't do anything upon activation. Sure, transforming things into zombies can help you with your plays and can help hinder some of your opponents, but it doesn't inherently give you a free card upon searching. It doesn't even send anything to the graveyard or bring something back. And so when you build with this thing, you gotta kind of balance, I want to see this thing because I'm building my deck around it, but I want to make sure that I don't see it too much because it doesn't inherently do anything. I'd rather just make sure I see it enough and then I get the maximum advantage out of it. So do keep that in mind. That's why we're going to start off with just a couple copies of Zombie World. From there, we have a couple different boss monsters that we can consider when making this deck. The first one is Red-Eye's Zombie Necro Dragon. This guy is basically the retrained version, and for all intents and purposes, better version of Red-Eye's Zombie Dragon. It's a level 7 generic synchro monster with the same stats as Red-Eye's. It's just a zombie, so you could bring it back as well. And it says it gains 100 attack and defense for every zombie on the field and in either graveyard, which means Zombie World gives this thing a mighty power boost from its 24 up easily past the 3k threshold. When another zombie monster is destroyed by battle, whether you killed it with this guy or anything else died, or maybe you crashed your own guy, a lot of different situations, you can special summon any zombie from either graveyard to your field, only a hard once per turn. So one of this is honestly enough because it sits in your extra deck. It'll be very easy to access, as we'll discuss with our tuner options down the line. But overall, it's just an amazing card because when you have Zombie World up, you can Monster Reborn anything, regardless of whether or not this guy is the attacker. So when you have the attack boost, stronger than Red-Eye Zombie Dragon, it's a synchro monster, so it's more accessible as an extra deck, pick it whenever you need type of a monster, and on top of that, it summons anytime a monster is killed, so it doesn't even have to be the one to destroy stuff like Red-Eye Zombie Dragon. So overall, Necro Dragon is a huge upgrade, but you realistically only need one because as a zombie, you can bring him back if he ever falls. So just the one copy there because, you know, toolboxing things in your extra is pretty important. What I go then is 3 copies of the main decked boss monster, Doom King Balerdrox. So this guy is a mighty level 8 dark zombie with 2800 attack and 2000 defense, and he reads, during the standby phase of either turn, if a face-up card in a field zone is either side of the field, and this card happens to be in your graveyard, you can special this card in defense position, but only a hard once per turn. So that means if this card's in your graveyard after you set it up during your first turn, you have Zombie World up, during your opponent's standby phase, boom, this guy comes back and can do his effects. Or let's say this guy dies during your opponent's turn, he can come back during your turn as well. Or if you have multiple guys set up, you can bring one of them back every single turn, whether or not you already have one on the field. So overall, pretty interesting for that constant recursion effect. Feels very similar to 𝗪𝗡𝗡 or 𝗪𝗍𝗍𝗏, a lot of the dark structure deck monsters where the monsters just don't die, and it's very fitting for zombies. Then he has two interesting effects, and it says once per chain. When a zombie monster except 𝗪𝗏𝗧 activates its effect, except during the damage step, as a quick effect, you can apply one of these two effects, but you can only use each of these once per turn, so once you use one, you have to use the other one, if anything at all. So you can either go and directly negate the zombie monster's effect, which is awesome because that means you just have a blanket negation on any one monster card in the turn, as long as you have Zombie World up, or you can banish a monster from the field or graveyard. And the cool thing with that text is, because it's happening during resolution, you don't have to choose a target, meaning things that cannot be targeted and have that form of protection are no longer invincible. You can just get rid of them. And don't forget, whereas that's a pretty interesting effect, disruptively during your opponent's turn, you can easily turn that into an advantage generator during your own turn by maybe triggering your own zombies down the line, as we'll discuss, something like Mizuki, as we'll discuss, and that will help you get rid of your opponent's cards and soften their board while you build your own forces. So 𝗪𝗏𝗧 is awesome because of its control ability, high stats, and the fact that he keeps coming back. So really, really awesome card. And then to make sure we have Zombie World at all times, I like playing a single copy of Necroworld Banshee, in addition to the fairly standard 2 terraformings that we're allowed to have in the format right now. So Banshee is awesome because she's an 1800 attack level 4 dark zombie who reads, Zombie World in the field zone cannot be destroyed by card effects, and neither player can target it with card effects. So pretty sweet, the fact that she's a zombie means you can bring her out and keep her out fairly easily, and if you do, you protect a zombie world that already exists, meaning you get value out of her even if you're not using her to search Zombie World. But she does have a quick effect that says when she's on the field or graveyard, you can banish her during either turn to activate a zombie world directly from your hand or deck, and you can only use that effect once per turn. But by playing a single copy of this, not only do you have access to, this becomes kind of your zombie world searcher, but you can go and yard this thing with Foolish Burial or any of the mimicking effects that will play coming up here, and be able to access Zombie World if you have not drawn your terraforming or the actual Zombie World spell. It basically makes it so every one of those yarding effects gives you a Zombie World as a potential option, and that's just so much more flexible than we had back in the day, where you had to hard draw either terraforming or Zombie World. On top of that, having the quick effect, even if it's only a hard once per turn, means, let's say I already have Zombie World up and I send Necroworld Banshee to the graveyard, this becomes insurance that if my opponent kills Zombie World, I can activate another one immediately. Everything stays a zombie with just a little, usually insignificant little gap where the opponent may have immediately killed it, and so with everything staying zombies, 𝗪𝗏𝗧 can do his thing and negate and banish monsters as planned. So that's why the one copy of Necroworld Banshee exists in here. And then the last card to really introduce and build around is 3 copies of Return of the Zombies. So this is a very powerful trap card, and it's just really, really cool. It's an amazing way to literally bring zombies back into the game. So it reads, banish a zombie monster on the field, then special summon a zombie monster from the graveyard of the player who originally controlled it to their field in defense position. So looking at that text, again, it doesn't target, which means you can get rid of any one monster. It banishes it so it doesn't even destroy, and it doesn't target. So this thing pretty much gets rid of anything you want. The only catch is you have to put a zombie monster back onto the field of that player in defense position, so you can't even revive links, you can't do necessarily damage through it unless you have some piercer, or better yet, Chaos Max Dragon or something, to double pierce or something like that. But essentially, very powerful, flexible removal you can activate at any time as long as you have Zombie World up. So this thing is absolutely insane, and as if that weren't enough, if this card exists in your graveyard, you can shuffle one of your banished zombies back into the deck to set this card, but banish it when it leaves the field, and you can only use each effective Return of the Zombies once per turn, but that means you can go ahead and immediately recycle it as a trap card that can happen during either turn, and then activate it if you have not already banished a monster. And as we'll talk about, Psy-Framelord Omega is a major component of this deck, and is able to abuse the heck out of this card, just like it was able to use tech cards like Rise to Full Height. So this is the central thing we're building around, now to flesh out the core just a little more. And to do that, we're going to start off with a simple one, the limited 𝗖𝗎𝗡𝗘𝗧 Burial. This card, without a normal summon or any other investment, just lets you go and yard any monster. Of course, one of the best -1s in the game right now. It lets you just go ahead and set Balerdrock or Necroworld Banshee, or you could go ahead and expand, your options by hitting something like Mizuki, as we'll get to in this section here. So no brainer, you play the 1 copy of that. Interestingly, we're playing not 2, but a full 3 copies of Uni-Zombie, because whereas previously in certain zombie engines, you would play 2 copies of this just so that you can solitaire a copy out and then make sure you have one live in case you were to draw 1 copy. You don't want to be stuck with just your 1 Uni-Zombie. This card is absolutely insane because this deck plays more into the zombie theme. It's a level 3 tuner monster of the zombie typing that says you can go ahead and use each of its effects as a hard once per turn. The first effect is you could target any monster on either side of the field that's face up and discard a card in order to increase that target's level by 1. So interestingly here, we could go ahead and get rid of any useful zombie from our hand to the graveyard while boosting this guy to a level 4 tuner, or maybe if you don't want to care about levels that much, just choose any monster your opponent controls or some other guy you control, and you can still get the free discard to set up your plays. On top of that, it has a second ability that can also be used in the same turn. In exchange for not being able to attack with anything that's not a zombie for the rest of the turn, you can go ahead and foolish burial any zombie from your deck to the graveyard, and same thing here, you target a monster and increase its level by 1. So the basic play that you usually do with Uni-Zombie is, of course, you bring out your Shiranui Solitaire, who's basically Lone Fire Blossom for Uni-Zombie, lets you tribute it in order to go for a zombie tuner with 0 defense. That's its only purpose in this deck, so unfortunately, some of the Shiranui cards may be coming up, may be useful, but this one just doesn't have enough useful support right now. You basically have now 6 copies to go straight into your Uni-Zombie, turbo that guy out, and when you do, you can go ahead and use its other ability to yard Mizuki, which we play a full 3 copies of in this deck because, again, all zombies, we can expand the engine and it's much less dead than if we were playing just like a smaller, zombie engine here. And what that does is, since Mizuki has the ability to banish itself in order to revive one of your other zombies that remains in your graveyard, Solitaire can come out as a level 4 monster, Uni-Zombie is now a level 4 monster, and the combination of those 2 monsters lets you go for a level 8 synchro, like Psy-Framelord Omega. Now, this card is really, really fun in this strategy because of a few things. First of all, I can't attack with non-zombies. Well, guess what? We have Zombie World on the field, turning him into a zombie, and he can still attack, so Uni-Zombie doesn't stop us from attacking with Omega or any other card in the deck, as long as our deck is going off without a hitch, which, it's kind of designed to do. That's our goal here. On top of that, Omega has some really interesting effects, of course. Lets you banish itself in order to go ahead and steal a card from your opponent's hand. It lets you, during your opponent's standby phase, push a card that's banished back into the graveyard, and that's really cool because it means, Mizuki goes back to the graveyard every turn, so you have a free summon. Or, what I like doing in this deck as well, in addition to using Return of the Zombies 1 time and having it go to the graveyard, you can then maybe take your Mizuki, return it back into the deck from banished, set this card face down. If you haven't played it yet this turn, you can activate it again. Oh, it gets banished, but if you have your standby phase to roll around here, or your opponent's standby phase rather, you can go and push this back to the graveyard, or let's say it's already been used and it's banished like this. During the standby phase, push this card back, set it that same turn, use it the same turn, it gets banished, and then next turn you could do the same thing again with the Omega. So Return of the Zombies, as flexible and awesome as it is for removing any monster from play without targeting or destroying, Omega makes even more use out of it, which is really, really crazy. And on top of that, if Omega ever falls, even though it's limited, remember he can recycle himself or any of your opponent's cards and force it back into the deck so that they don't have access to graveyard while putting himself back, which means now you're able to go ahead and summon out Omega turn after turn using that Mizuki that you keep recycling. So really powerful engine here. Again, to recap, it's the 1 Omega, 3 Uni-Zombie, 3 Solitaires, and 3 Mizukis, even though I kind of have them mixed up here in my hands, mainly because this deck doesn't mind drawing into any of these. They're not dead duplicates because you're playing zombies. And then just to expand that a little bit, I like playing a single copy of Scarlight Red Dragon Archfiend because sometimes, Omega's the generalist, right? He's able to take out your opponent's cards, he's able to go and replace himself, attack for 2800, push your cards back. it's the all-around, you summon that guy first. But if your opponent has already established a big board, you could go ahead and summon Scarlet, Red Dragon, Archfiend, blow up everything with 3,000 attack or less that's been special summoned except himself, and then burn your opponent by 500 for each one. So absolutely insane ability, especially considering your zombies don't care if they die, you're going to get them back anyway, whereas your opponent's field is all torn up, and then you do extra damage for everything that you've killed. So very flexible removal card that you can easily access at the level 8 spot. And that basically does it for synchros. For the main, most part so far, it's the 2 level 8s and the 1 zombie synchro, and then we'll talk about 1 tech card down the line. But the last card I like to play in the main core of zombies is 𝗤𝗠𝗅𝗍, a single copy, because essentially it's a level 4 Earth zombie with 1700 attack, 800 defense, which is fitting for, you know, being Mizuki's brother. 𝗤𝗠𝗅𝗍 basically says, during your main phase, you could send a zombie monster directly from deck to grave. Oh wait, so it's another Foolish Burial? Cool, so we have 3 solitaires into 3 Uni-Zombies for 6. You have 𝗤𝗠𝗅𝗍 and Foolish Burial, so you have 8 ways now to start off, which means with a 5-card hand, a 69, essentially 70% chance you'll open with one of these guys to just get one of your key combo pieces right to the graveyard. So very powerful for that little boost. You get boosted up from like 63% up to 69, so 6% boost, pretty good. But the main reason I like playing this at 1 is that if this card is sent to the graveyard in any way, discarded by Uni-Zombie, yarded by something else, you can go ahead and banish a different zombie that's not 𝗤𝗠𝗅𝗍 and special summon a zombie type monster from your hand, which means if you have Ballardrock in your hand or any other combo extender like a Mizuki or whatever, you can go ahead and bring that out. Playing the single copy of this essentially makes it so you're able to go ahead and toolbox it whenever you need, just like the Necroworld Banshee, and I think it's a very flexible card that, if nothing else, just becomes another copy of get my combos started by sending something to the graveyard. So I definitely like the 1 𝗤𝗠𝗅𝗍 in constructed play as well. When creating that initial concept, I liked how things were going, you know, with all those cards that are able to go ahead and foolish my key combo pieces, and just the decent chance of drawing into one of my 5 field spell targets or my 3 Ballardrocks. Things were looking pretty good, but I did notice a lot of my cards that yard things are normal summon reliant. Once you get things yarded like Mizuki or whatever, you could go ahead and get free special summons, but in the initial stages I wanted a little bit of a boost, and to do that I figured classic Brilliant Fusion is an awesome way to go, because Brilliant Fusion of course lets us play just a single Garnet and a Gem Knight Seraph Knight, fusion summon this guy using materials from the deck along with a light monster, and you're able to get an additional normal summon. You can only use that effect once per turn, but when you have Zombie World up, it becomes even better, because now I can go ahead and revive Seraph Knight as a Mizuki target or whatever, and potentially get double normal summons turn after turn after turn, which is really insane. And on top of that, being a level 5 monster you put on the field for free is awesome, because you're able to go ahead and Mizuki your Uni-Zombie back to the field, or maybe make that as one of your normal summons, and Uni-Zombie you can just keep as a level 3, target some other monster if you're using its effects, and then you could synchro summon your level 8s using Seraph Knight as your level 5 non-tuner with the level 3 Uni-Zombie tuner. It ends up fitting quite nicely, and we'll talk about Ash Blossom in just a bit as well, and it fits perfectly alongside that as well, giving you plenty of ways to synchro summon for 8, which our core is trying to do. And then from here, the light targets are basically the 2 you see on the left. I love this performance trio. It's been kind of a little bit since I used them here, but essentially Trick Clowns, everyone's classic. It's sent to the graveyard, you target one of your performance monsters in your grave and summon it, make its attack and defense 0, and you do burn for 1,000, and you can only use one of these per turn, but it's essentially perfectly fitting in the zombie theme, gives you potentially 2 materials if not used immediately with Foolish Burial or Brilliant Fusion, but in this instance it's just a free monster, helps you go for things like Saryuja or whatever you may need to do as well. Damage Juggler is my personal pick a lot of the time though, because on top of having the ability to serve as a hand trap or like a grave block thing to basically prevent damage, whether it's battle damage or effect damage, you have the ability to banish it from your graveyard in order to go ahead and search one of these other guys from your deck. And Hat Tricker, although it's an earth monster, fits perfectly into this theme. Has 1100 attack and defense, has an effect that protects you from burn damage by like putting counters on it instead. Unfortunately only works on activated effects, so some of the trick stars do get under that. But the main point of playing Hat Tricker here is if there are 2 or more monsters on the field total between your and your opponent's cards, so very easy to do if you're going second. You're able to go and just drop him to the field for free, and as an earth monster, he comes in as a pretty interesting stat as well, in addition to 𝗪𝗠𝗍, as we'll talk about in just a little moment here. But basically, free monster you can summon, and your deck thinning for 2 of these guys, making it much more likely you'll draw into your key pieces down the line, and it helps make your bigger plays. Now it's time to talk about some of the tech that flesh out this main deck here, and we're starting off with everybody's favorite hand trap, 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. So on top of this being the, oh, everyone knows about Ash Blossom, it's just OP because it stops your opponent's interaction with their deck, it's even better here because as a zombie monster, you can revive it from the graveyard, and on top of that, it's a level 3 tuner that you can combine with your Seraph Knight to make the Psy-Framelord Omega or the Scarlight. So those are really cool aspects. But as if that weren't enough, if you have 𝗲𝗓𝗡 on your field and you use this thing maybe to stop your opponent's Rhoda or a 𝗲𝗡liche Burial type of effect, you then have used a zombie monster's effect, which triggers 𝗲𝗓𝗡, allowing you're not going to, of course, negate Ash Blossom, that'd be silly. You can, though, go ahead and banish any card in your opponent's field or graveyard that's a monster, and that's really cool because you're punishing your opponent for searching by blocking this, and you're able to go ahead and get rid of another card because you have 𝗲𝗓𝗡 coming back every single turn. So Ash Blossom is just absolutely nuts in this deck. Honestly, even if it weren't like the main deckable staple in current Yu-Gi-Oh, I probably would have been playing some copies of it just because of how flexible it is at activating and triggering 𝗲𝗓𝗡 during your opponent's turn. It's a 1-2 punch that makes your opponent lose resources really, really quickly, especially when it's their only Rhoda or their Pot of Desires or something that they really need to resolve, otherwise they have some issues getting started. Then from here, fitting for the zombie theme, the undead monsters, is a copy each of Soul Charge and Monster Reborn. Fairly self-explanatory. Soul Charge wins you games out of nowhere, and since you're loading things into your graveyard, it's really, really powerful. Monster Reborn works in a similar way as 𝗪𝗠𝗍 as well, although it's not as reusable at all times. Access to your opponent's graveyard is pretty cool, and you can't really have too many free special summons, especially when you have one of each of these guys. Even with 𝗪𝗠𝗍 every turn, if you combine it with that 𝗪𝗠𝗍, hey, you don't even need a normal summon in order to be able to make some big plays, so very powerful. And don't forget, if you bring back Link monsters, which you could do with Zombie World as well, you're able to get more Link ratings to keep climbing up the Link system. So definitely like that. And then I also like going and playing just 1 copy of 𝗖𝗍𝗶𝗹𝗲 as a general Earth tuner monster. You're rarely using him for a synchro summon of your main guys that I discussed here, but you are able to go for 𝗪𝗔𝗍𝗔 Beast by playing this guy. So you're already playing 𝗲𝗡liche Burial, meaning you have 2 copies essentially of this card floating around in your deck. If you happen to have it in your grave without access to an Earth monster, oh, I could go ahead and just mill 1, which could help bring this guy back, and it's 2 monsters to use for summons. But on top of that, don't forget, you're able to go ahead and 𝗪𝗔𝗍𝗔 Beast just needs 2 Earth monsters, so we need a level 4. What about 𝗪𝗠𝗍𝗔's an Earth monster? 𝗤𝗠𝒑𝒑's an Earth monster. Hat Tricker, which we access very consistently through Brilliant Fusion, thanks to Damage Juggler, is also an Earth monster. They're all level 4. Essentially, you're always going to have Earth level 4s. Having this thing just gives you 2 shots in your deck to go for 𝗪𝗔𝗍𝗔 Beast to protect your zombie world, and otherwise, of course, just shut out your opponent from their Sky Strikers or any other spell cards that they may need to get their deck rolling. So combo potential here is just the fact that it's a generalist. It comes back, it mills cards, but it does give you access to one of the best cards in the game, and of course one of my personal favorites, so I had to go ahead and fit in the 𝗖𝗍𝗶𝗹𝗲 there. And then to wrap up the main, we play 2 copies of Enemy Controller for its flexibility. Essentially, if you picked up the structure deck, you may have known there's a card called Zombie Necronize, a normal spell that says if there is a level 5 or higher zombie on the field, you can go ahead and Change of Heart one of your opponent's cards. It's literally the text of Change of Heart. And on top of that, it lets you recycle it by, just like your Return of the Zombies trap card, taking one of your banished zombies and shuffling it back into the main. You could go ahead and set the spell, but unlike the trap card, Necronize specifically says that if you use one of its effects, you can't use the other, because it says you can only use one of its effects per turn, and only once that turn. So yeah, I can activate Necronize and Change of Heart a monster, given the condition, but then it goes to the grave, I have to wait a turn, next turn I can set it with its effect, Then I have to wait another turn, and I get it. So like in 3 turns you get 2 uses. It's not worth it at that point. I figured enemy controller is much more flexible. You have the ability to shift things battle positions to make it more advantageous for you doing damage. You can steal things during your opponent's turn since it's a quick play spell, making it a lot more flexible and allowing you to do just crazy shenanigans, kind of in the vein of 𝗖𝗍𝗡𝗘𝗖𝗧, just because I've been playing a lot of Sky Strikers, that comes to mind. And the fact that you have a bunch of free monsters through 𝗪𝗍𝗍 or 𝗬𝗓𝗏 coming back every turn means enemy controller is very easily sustainable here. So classic JDGaming card fits right in here, and I do love its flexibility. And then the last card for power plays is Torrential Tribute. Holy crap, this card may not be the staple it once was in Yu-Gi-Oh, but this card is absolutely amazing in this strategy. Normal trap, if you guys haven't seen this in a while, says it triggers upon a monster being summoned, including every type of summon, and just destroys every monster on the field. But you don't care about your guys dying. Omega dodges, 𝗬𝗓𝗏 comes back every turn, 𝗪𝗍𝗍 can literally monster-born any of your zombies, which becomes your entire graveyard when you have Zombie World up. Meanwhile, your opponent's field, you just pick off the individual monsters that are problematic using 𝗬𝗓𝗏, getting through anti-targeting, using return of the zombies to banish stuff that, you know, has protection in any form essentially, and then you soften up the field and then clean up the rest using Torrential Tribute. This Power Washer just gets rid of everything. You either dodge or come back anyway, so you're never losing out. This card is basically the perfect, hey, you thought you could play through some of my cards here, but I'm just going to clean up the rest of your cards and you're not going to kill me this turn. And definitely is really powerful since you're clearing up the field for you to attack during the following turn. So that's how we get the main deck done. And finally, it's time for the extra deck here. So just climbing up the Link monsters to make things easier, because that's basically it for the Synchros and the 1 Fusion. No Xyz monsters because there aren't the best right now in terms of resources. You lose too much when you use 2 guys for an Xyz summon and then don't get any value back. You do, however, gain a lot of advantage when you use, you know, the Link monsters because the Link rating keeps adding up. So pretty standard Nightmare Phoenix and Cerberus. Phoenix is especially popular right now. People are cutting Cerberus, but in this deck, don't forget that if you use your zombie, the Banishing Trap card, the Return of the Zombies, you put a monster on your opponent's field and then it's in the main zone, so Cerberus can go ahead and pop it immediately, which just adds an extra layer of removal on top of your easily used trap. Don't forget, these guys do let you discard a card and draw Vertical Link, but discarding a card is a nice cost because it helps you set up your key plays, and they're just stepping stones for bigger plays. You're probably not extra linking in this deck, even with the free summons. There are like 1 or 2 summons here or there, you know, for power plays. However, if there are Link 2s like that sitting in your grave, you can easily bring them back using 𝗪𝗍𝗍𝗏 with Zombie World, and then have, you know, higher Link ratings to climb into, and that's why we go for some of the higher Link monsters here as well. The other 2 Link 2s I like playing, Link 2s, excuse me, is Proxy Dragon, because this thing protects any card on your field by killing monsters it's pointing to instead. So go and use a Trick Clown, go and use 𝗬𝗓𝗏 or something else that's going to come back, and you're able to protect Zombie World and everything else on your field by destroying that card instead. So very powerful when you want to protect a key card like Zombie World in this deck. And Vampire Sucker, I love how the OCG version's only a rare, not a secret like ours. But basically, 1600 attack Link 2, Dark Zombie that says you need 2 zombie monsters. Very easy to do, especially with Zombie World, because you can literally use any 2 monsters in the game that are affected by Zombie World. It says, if you tribute summon a zombie monster, you can sacrifice your opponent's monsters in place of your own. That's cool because although you normally will special summon 𝗬𝗓𝗏 from your graveyard, you could, in theory, use this card and then just sack 2 of your opponent's monsters like a lava golem and bring out 𝗬𝗓𝗏, which is a huge swing in momentum, and it makes it so you can take your 𝗪𝗍𝗍𝗏 and your Monsterborn, those types of effects, and just bring out this guy and get some advantage. Then she has 2 other abilities that can each only be used once per turn, and the first effect is, once per turn you can just go ahead and make your opponent revive a monster in defense position that's a zombie, and actually I think it turns it into a zombie, so even if it weren't a zombie, it'd be able to do that. So why would you do that exactly? You have to summon it in defense position too, so it's like, that's not the best way of doing things. You can't bring back Link monsters and all that stuff. Well, it's because of its other ability. Its second ability says, when a zombie monster is summoned from the graveyard, hard once per turn again, and that's very important, you draw a card. So now I can give my opponent a monster, I draw a card. If they already had 1 monster, I can go and sack both of them for 𝗬𝗓𝗏. This is basically just a flexible Link monster with its 2 ideal diagonal arrows, and on top of that is able to go ahead and give you some nice little tricks to help round out your plays. So not necessarily like, oh my gosh, it's amazing in this deck, but it does a lot of cute tricks, and it's really, really cool when you're able to combine it with some of the plays that we've talked about. So definitely I would have it. It's not mandatory, but I think it is one of the best link monsters we could put in here who have downward arrows of any kind in this extra deck, because don't forget, you don't have those on Proxy Dragon or the Nightmares. Then for link 3s, I play just 2 of them total. We play Nightmare Unicorn because it combines with our other Nightmares. It's a removal card, it discards cards, and it helps you draw potentially, so it's really cool in that respect. But I especially like Summon Sorceress because remember, she needs 2 monsters of the same type who are going to add up to link 3 or higher, and that's very easy to do. Zombie World makes everything a zombie, so even if they're not your guys, let's say you econ a guy, they're all zombies automatically, so absolutely crazy. And don't forget, you can bring back any link 2 monster using 𝗪𝗠𝗍 thanks to Zombie World, and then that adds up with any of your other creatures to make Summon Sorceress. It lets you go ahead and summon any zombie from your deck, and since your deck is loaded with zombies, you're able to actually take advantage of that, and then you can climb up into one of your link 4s using Summon Sorceress. So it's not necessarily, oh my gosh, you have to have her either. So, you know, if she's not out in your territory, well, she will be soon, so that's a good thing to know. But I would recommend playing it if you do have access to it. It's a very powerful card, and it basically opens up another layer of strategy in this deck. And then from here, 2 utility type of cards here that everyone loves playing, of course, is Borreload and 𝗪𝗔𝗓. I don't have to explain these guys too much, but essentially, this guy steals stuff and is immune to a lot of stuff, and has the fun, you can't respond to my quick effect attack drop, so very powerful and able to swing the game around in your favor very easily. And 𝗪𝗔𝗓 is easy to summon off of Brilliant Fusion because you get Seraph Knight and another Performage monster for free. You get 2 normal summons and potentially more thanks to Uni-Zombie and so on. So no reason not to play 𝗪𝗔𝗓. I found myself going for this card a lot, so I think you will find it useful. Borrel's Sword Dragon would be an interesting card in here as well. I just don't have access to one right now, so that's why it is the way it is. And what we play in the last 2 spots then are more easily accessible generic link 4s. So both of these guys just need 2 monsters, and that's important because now you can go and summon Sorceress plus a guy into this, which is very powerful. Firewall Dragon needs no introduction. It's powerful in this deck, and although I considered like Goblin Zombie or something for looping, I ended up finding that's just a weaker version of 𝗪𝗍𝗄, and so in this case, you know, yeah, you can get Firewall Dragon, use it for its setup and, you know, all the things you would with Firewall Dragon, but it's not necessarily the MVP you have to go for it or anything. It's just in here as a nice access toolbox card, because overall it is still very flexible and powerful, even if you're not using it for its abusive search and summon abilities, you know. And then not search, but, you know, if you search, summon abilities. What I do like teching in here is Nightmare Griffin, because I finally found a deck where this fits quite beautifully. Has the same arrows and summoning conditions as Stardust Dragon, as long as the names of the monsters are different, and it basically has 3 effects here. So the first effect is going to be you are able to go ahead and upon link summon, you're gonna discard a card and target a spell or trap in your grave and set it onto the field. You can't play it that turn, but that's cool because I can go ahead and set my trap cards like Torrential Tribute or my the Return of the Zombies. I always forget the name of that card, but you guys know what I'm talking about. The new one, the good trap card. And that's assuming you don't want to grab your econ or, you know, Zombie World. Honestly, you could grab as well if you really need it. It's very flexible in this strategy, so definitely like it for that effect. If you were co-linked, you draw an additional card as well, so that's a nice little bonus. Combined with the discard effect, you're able to go ahead and 𝗪𝗠𝗍𝗑, and then its final effect is a continuous effect that reads, while it is linked, or rather on the field, only monsters that are linked to something, so pointed at or pointing at something, can go ahead and activate their effects if they've been special summoned. And that's really cool because in a lot of situations between Summon Sorceress and the diagonal arrows of something like 𝗪𝗺𝗪𝗧, you're going to be able to summon this thing in a zone that's not directly under one of these 2 here. And that means now if you put it right in the middle here, let's say, you're able to go ahead and maybe summon your 𝗪𝗺𝗪𝗏 over right next to it in this position here. So now 𝗪𝗺𝗪𝗏's able to use its effects, but my opponent can't if they summon into their extra monster zone. So that's why I really like this card. It's just an additional limiter on what your opponent's able to do, and it's very easy to arrange your guys since you get free special summons from the graveyard pretty much at all points thanks to 𝗪𝗠𝗍𝗑 and stuff, and you're able to set it up nicely where you have a one-sided floodgate thanks to Griffin's effect. So all of its effects are useful in this strategy, and that's why I like it as the 15th. If you watched the video in its entirety, thanks! Hopefully you guys enjoyed seeing the creation of this proper build of Zombie Horde as much as I did putting it together. It's always fun revisiting budget decks like this, I feel, and sometimes you're able to get more out of it if you don't stick with just the starter decks or whatever. So I just had to go and revisit this thing. But anyway, we're gonna go through the main here. It's just 40. We have triple Ash Blossom here, triple Doom King Balerdrak for our boss, Glow Up Bulb and Gozuki at 1, triple Mizuki here. Then we have 1 Necro World Banshee to search Zombie World during either turn. Then we have a Performance Trio of Damage Juggler, Hat Tricker, and Trick Clown for our Brilliant Fusion targets, triple Shiranui Solitaire to turbo out our triple Uni-Zombie, and 1 Gem Knight Garnet. And then we have triple Brilliant Fusion, double JDGaming, Foolish Burial, Monster Reborn, Soul Charge, double Terraforming, and double Zombie World for spells. And then for traps we have 6. We have Return of the Zombies at 3 and Torrential Tribute as well. Again, finishing things up at the flat 40 that we've come to know and love. And then on top of that, we have our 15 extra deck with Link 2s. First, we have Cerberus and Phoenix for Nightmares, Proxy Dragon, and Vampire Sucker. So 4 very versatile Link 2s, and I do like the fact that you can revive these guys, so that's why there's so many. Then we have Nightmare Unicorn and Summon Sorceress at our Link 3 spots. Then we have for Link 4s Borolo Dragon, Firewall Dragon, Nightmare Griffin, who's just an all-star in the strategy, and Saryuja Skull Dread. And then Synchro Monsters, Naturia Beast at 5 off your Glow Up Bulb and your many Earths. We have the new Red Eyes Zombie Necro Dragon at 7. Then we have Psy-Framelord Omega and Scarlight Red Dragon Archfiend at level 8, and then of course Gem Knight Seraph Knight for our Brilliant Fusion plays. That's the end of this video, but there's plenty more where it came from. I invite you to explore the playlists on screen to see what else I have to offer, and if you really liked what you saw today, consider subscribing to JDGaming for more Yu-Gi-Oh videos. Thanks guys, this is JDGaming, hope you guys enjoyed as always, and I'll see you guys next time.